afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Our meeting is called to order for today's work session. Imagine you've had an opportunity to review or preview the agenda. It is our typical, our new model, of course, an approach to our work session agenda with reports from the major departments. Placing community engagement today at the top after we deal with our school board budget, because the last couple of work sessions, time has not allowed us to get to their reports. And so after the school budget report, that'll be the next item of business. So we'll begin our meeting item 1.02 with our fiscal year 2015 school board budget planning. We had an opportunity just to review it and get familiar with it last Thursday, and I'm sure we've had some time to think a little bit about it. I know Courtney submitted some thoughts, and Noelle also shared that she has also some thoughts. So I just want to make a couple of comments as we approach this budget. And I would recommend that we just kind of, again, go line by line and talk about if there are any adjustments or recommendations for consideration. First thing I would say is that I do understand the importance of us cutting costs. Obviously, we have a nearly $14 million gap that we have to close. And although our budget, the school board's portion of the budget, is a very, very small percentage of the overall $311 million budget, it is a part of it. Now, I also have to say, and I've had this conversation with my dear friend, Dr. Thornton, that a couple of years of doing this now, there are several approaches that we've taken that in the past, and I just want to mention these to us. When the district was challenged to find 7% in each area, we sought to do that with the school board budget. I'm not sure if that kind of equity is possible or prudent. I guess anything's possible. I'm not sure how prudent it is. I'm certainly open to whatever we need to do, but I'm not sure we want to hold ourselves to a percentage, again, given the nature of this budget. But just for our consideration. The other thing we sought to do in the past is one of the things that you recommended, Courtney, and that is reducing the number of persons that actually attend the conferences, which cuts down greatly on travel, lodging, and meals and registration. A part of that conversation, though, has been, is it still worth the membership? Because with some of those conferences, as most of us have attended some of them now, and know that, such as Council of Great City Schools, there are a number of really, really good workshops and seminars that are offered. And with one board member in attendance, I'm just not sure that it really is taking advantage of the value of the membership. Again, none of my comments are suggesting that we shouldn't consider these things. I want to be very clear about that. Just food for thought. We went as far 2 years ago as to ending our VSPA's membership in a cost-cutting, and so we were able to.
3 years ago?
Was it 3?
I think it was before
was 3 years ago.
because Warren wouldn't let that happen.
And I had a compulsive activity.
He did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Warren
yeah.
would have laid across the railroad tracks on that one. Tiananmen Square.
We talked him off the ledge on that one, and I must say publicly, Warren, you were right. that was a bad decision.
I hope we can get a copy of that tape.
And
Think about a blind squirrel.
we quickly reversed that decision once we learned how important that this membership is and partnership, and how detrimental that decision was or could have been. So here we are again, and each year I'm sure until things begin to head back in the opposite direction, we'll be having this conversation again next year, I imagine. But that's just food for thought. So we will simply walk through the budget assisted by Janelle, each line item, and yes. Well, we could start there if you like.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, all right, good enough. Okay, but then I will open the floor for the feedback you prepared.
Would you like me to start?
Sure, go right ahead.
Beginning with our contract with VSPA, we had a contract last year that was for $15,000, and our contract for this year is for $20,000. Some of the items that I wanted to ask of them is to get an itemized bill of what the charges are.
Right.
Books, meals, phone calls, if they're charging us to have communications with them.
Sure.
If they're billing us for that. And I honestly think that 4 meetings would be fine for us. So I don't think that the entire 6 meetings that they're proposing are necessary. So those are my thoughts on the contract.
Let's stop right there for a second, and I would certainly entertain the other thoughts on it. I have some of my own, but I would like to receive others. So let me ask, are you proposing that we not accept the cost of the 20,000 increase at the suggestion? Is that what you're?
Not for 6 sessions. Because 20,000 is for 6 sessions.
Right, okay.
You're suggesting to go back to 15,000 before?
Yes, yes, and get a line item of what they're charging us. Because if they're charging us 15,000 and then they're sending bills to Janelle on top of that for phone calls, meals, books, then we need to know exactly what this $15,000 is getting us. Is it just the face-to-face time with them and the retreat, which is wonderful, and we've benefited from it tremendously, but I think for $15,000 or $20,000, we have to be responsible on our end and know exactly what we're paying for.
Okay. All right, Ed?
Yeah, as part of the effort to become a school board of distinction, will these 6 meetings, are they required as part of that effort? That would be a question of.
Well, that's not, keep in mind that when we developed the partnership, it was built in with services that Panasonic Foundation was providing, and that is the facilitation of the 2 retreats that we already had on our annual calendar. The board organization retreat that takes place in July, and the mid-year planning retreat that takes place in January. When we developed that partnership with the focus on becoming a board of distinction and focusing on board development, then we added the day-and-a-half training, those additional 2 in the fall and in the spring. So there was no set requirement of 6 training sessions in order to become. That's not a part of the criteria to become a board of distinction. So that.
Yeah, because I'm wondering about the training that we have gone through.
Right.
And of course, that was part of what they were asking us to do. And so that's more than the number of trainings that you just mentioned.
Sure, and so the additional 2, in my conversations with Gina and with Deborah, centered around now the need to drill down deeper into board governance work. And so we've talked about ethics, and to use Rodney's term, playing nice in the sandbox. And so now the plan is to move to a more technical and tactical level of board development, so that we're not just being fair and respectful, but in addition to that, we're operating at a high level of efficiency as a board. And they feel 2 additional sessions would really help to drill down into those technical areas. And I'll reserve other thoughts for.
I guess my view is different. I think the contract, it I mean, getting the additional detail, I think it's fine, but I don't have any unreadiness with the contract. I think we ought to do the 6 sessions. You know, we've talked about, at least Dr. King has talked about the importance of professional development throughout the operation. I think the board has to also continue the professional development work. I think it's been very good for this board. Right now, we're still a 2-year term appointed board, even as legislation goes through. They may change that to 3 years, but the importance of the board development training, the board of distinction priority that we have, you know, all the things that Dr. King has brought forward in addition to that in terms of his own view and work with boards of distinction. I would be concerned if we send a signal, you know, 18 months, 6 months, however long it has been, into our board development, board governance, and board policy work to then back away from it, because I think we've made good strides, but we're a long way from being a board of distinction. And so my view is we should stick to the recommendation that we received and continue to do the work, and then once you reach a point where you feel that we can go on cruise control, then you shift to cruise control. But I think there are other areas, it's a cost savings measure. I think there are other things we can look at in the board's budget, rather than cutting training and rather than cutting board docs. To me, all the other things we can look at, but I think those 2 things are critical to the continued growth and development of the board.
Thank you. Courtney?
One consideration might be that we do 15,000 for 4, and if we feel the need for the 2, then we pay the additional 2,000 per, which seems to be what is in the budget for these additional 1-dayers. Just an option, so that we still get the 15, but the option still pursue additional governance training.
Now, keep in mind, I don't think the increase had to do with the 2 additional sessions. If you look closely, the 6 sessions were in the first contract. And so the increase is certainly not based on 2 additional trainings, okay? You know, no, that was,
We chose it.
yeah, our decision, and that is an additional cost. To be quite honest with you, my opinion is that this kind of training and consulting is in that market is very expensive. $20,000 for the service that they're providing us in the market of that kind of work is not a lot of money. And so they started pretty low. To be quite honest with you, at $15,000, to my surprise. And so I think, you know, what I'm always told, because I'm a pretty frugal person, that you get what you pay for. So I don't have any heartburn with $20,000 when I look at the value and importance of the service that they're providing us.
And I would suggest to the board to recall the significance or the point for having meetings in Charlottesville too. And the reason that we, as a governance leadership team, had decided that was important was because of governance leadership team training that could be done there and to be focused. Whereas when you do it locally, you don't have the same flexibility as necessary, possibly. So just something to think about.
In addition to that, it's the camaraderie that's developed. Part of it is when you do a training here, once 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock hits, boom, everybody's gone to their own way. Here we have breakfast together, we have dinner together. There's a lot to be said about that for team building.
I would agree. I think that 6 meetings gives us the opportunity to really grow as a governance leadership team. And I think that's very important for the kind of things that we're doing, the kind of critical nature of the work that we're doing right now.
Just speaking of the meetings alone, the thing we would have to do is the end of this year. If we are all agreed to go to the 6th, is to build it into the calendar on the front end, because getting those dates on the calendar once we get into the year, all of us having very busy schedules in addition to the demanding schedule and the calendar of the school board work becomes challenging, as scheduling the spring's training has become now for us. Okay, sure.
One last thought on that too. I suggest that it is, that we make it, or consider making it our anticipated goal for next year. If we go with 6, or if we go with 4, our goal should be to reach the necessities to be a board of distinction by the completion of our next school year. Because we would have done this, that would be our 3rd year. And typically, that's what it takes to get to where you want to be. And so we need to have that laser-like focus on really accomplishing that task by the end of school year next year.
And so there are 2 things we have to keep our eye on as we develop the agenda for the trainings. One are the goals that we set in our strategic plan under priority for board governance training. And then 2, the criteria, VSPA's criteria for board of distinction. And our training should be designed to at least meet those 2 objectives, in addition to other areas that we desire to strengthen and develop. So I'm in agreement with you. Yes, Warren?
For 30 years, I've seen the value as an educator and now as a board member for VSPA. And I don't see anyone here doubting that. I see the future value to Dr. King, particularly as it becomes part of the infrastructure of Virginia, being able to share with and take from his colleagues across the state as being critical. If what we're trying to do is to find some savings here, I can only speak to just this yesterday and the day before. Under the conference that I just attended, I have for next year, since I may be on the board next year, I could stay with a friend. We need the registration for that conference, but we could save, if we're looking for every dollar, we could save a few dollars at housing and whatever. So there is some small savings. Transportation for me was $100 as opposed to $600. So, there is some small savings. I could work with Ms. Banks on saving on that and still accomplish what we need from that experience. So I'd be willing to volunteer to work with cost savings for next year on that. But as far as our relationship, I'm so grateful that we made the decision 3 years ago to do what we did. And this is just the beginning of the relationship that Dr. King will have with his colleagues across the state, where he also shares a great deal of the good things that are going on here.
Thank you. And I agree with you. Okay, Noah, you had some other? No, did you? I think did you have some others?
Not on the, not for the VSBA.
No, I mean on this budget period.
Yes, on the budget. Kind of to start and piggyback on what Dr. Stewart had mentioned as far as travel costs, I certainly don't mind rooming with Courtney, to save monies. Let's see here. Janelle had mentioned that she needed a new computer or 2 new computers. I was wondering if we could perhaps ask some of our local businesses if they would like to donate the computer, perhaps Walmart or Costco or Office Depot, any of those, if they would be willing to donate the computer.
How about all those people get vendor licenses?
True. That was one point. For our
Feel
food.
confident we could be successful there? Okay, very good.
For our food, as far as our food for our meetings, I was wondering if we should consider contracting.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Noah, I apologize.
Sure, all right. for our meals during our meetings, work
Mhm.
sessions, business sessions, formal sessions, I was wondering if we might be able to contract with one or two local restaurants or businesses, and say, you know, for a set price, we need lunch and dinner the
Mhm.
first and third Wednesday, you know, whatever dates we end up picking, and
Mhm.
say, can you contract it for this amount, you know, perhaps even put it out to a bid. I think it's 10,000 that
Mhm.
we spend, right now, so I think that would be a bidded amount
Mhm.
that would need to go out. And then anything else that's extra, then, you know, ad hoc meetings, budget meetings, whatever, then we can work on that. But we might be able to negotiate a cheaper price by doing that.
Mhm.
I think those are all the big comments that I had, actually.
Okay. Now, I would say, just concerning these first two items, which I think are good recommendations, Noel, we would have to quickly do our
Yeah.
research, because we have to ratify this in about
I know.
60 days. And so we would definitely need to know that we could get the computers, and we would have to quickly reach out if we, you know, going to.
Well, we can probably still put it in the budget, and then if we end up getting those services or the computer, then we
Mhm.
can put those monies towards other things, because Janelle is already saying she's having to pull funds from other places to.
Sure.
So,
I'd like to make a comment on
Sure.
the meal cost that, right now, you know, the state has an allocation per diem for each meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and we are under each of those with every meal that I purchase. I try to be very conscious of, you know, being cost conscious when I'm making meal purchases, as well as, I use all local businesses, and most of them are in Norfolk, so I do try to keep it, but I just want you to let you know that I am cost conscious on
yes,
food.
yes.
But with the number of meetings and activities and the length and hours,
Mhm.
it just seems to
Yeah.
add up after a while.
And I think the same year that we cut the VSBA partnership, we made that emotional decision to,
You were really tiny development, huh?
we were, I mean, I don't know if we, yeah, I can't remember if we just said we would cut the meals and everybody just kind
We cut
of
the whole thing.
bring your own. I think that lasted 1 month, and.
One meeting.
Kurt, I suggest that you and Rodney room together.
I don't have a problem with that at all.
See, I'm not gonna tell all the Charlottesville business, okay? Just gonna let it go.
Okay.
A couple of questions.
Sure.
Janelle, on the piece where you have the board docs and the video streaming service for 10,000,
Right, you know, we talked they had mentioned a couple of services, and there was that one service called Snag It, and had gotten some, preliminary information on that, and I was just trying to give a ballpark, you know, for budgeting purposes, but there is an annual fee
So
after
you-
the initial setup, so.
right, but that's an add-on. So right now.
That's an add-on.
So right now, in the larger budget,
Take that out.
we're gonna be looking at the services that we're getting right now from media
Channel-
services, correct?
Right.
Channel 47.
Channel 47.
And then you just have this 10,000 in here as a potential placeholder.
Yes, sir.
Should we go that route and have some determination as to whether which is more efficient, is that correct?
That's correct.
And on the additional staff person,
Yes, sir.
can you elaborate a little more on what you have in mind there?
Deputy clerk, executive secretary position. There used to be one when I first came on to this position, and right now, you know, we have part-time staff. So I need a qualified professional person that can be my backup. For example, if I'm not here, that they can carry on business and conduct meetings and so forth, and assist with a lot of the office operations. Right now, we have a part-time college student who will be leaving us at the end of this school year. So I won't have any assistance in the office.
And then the last question, trying to follow this. The increase in the salaries and benefits, is that largely being driven by the same VRS issues that we were seeing elsewhere?
The PRS as well as the, if we
If you do
decide
this
to approve
system.
that position.
So you're not looking for us to make,
Well, I mean, yes, today, we really need to, yeah.
okay, so you want us to make decisions on this today?
I think we should, as much as possible.
And do you have a goal? Is the goal to try to be flat, or just, where are you trying to, where would you like us to go with this? I
Well,
guess?
a recommendation was that we would consider 5% now.
5% total increase,
No.
reduction
Reduction,
from last year?
yes. Of actual. And, budgeted, I'm sorry.
So that this year's, that the proposed 2015 budget be 5% lower than what the revised budget was for 2014, is that correct?
Right, and so that revised budget was, 282, yes, 289, so 5%.
14.45.
So my thinking is that perhaps, and I hate to use the word easiest, but for lack of a better term, and Janelle, I don't know how quickly you could help us do the math on this. Well, first, let me ask a question. How many of us would be in support of reducing the number of persons attending the conferences? For me, that's low-hanging fruit, although, I mean, of course, prudence is one thing, but.
So, there are two areas that I think we could, did you say we're trying to get to 15,000? Is that what we're trying to do? So, to me, if we eliminate the streaming for now, that's 10,000 there. And I don't think the issue is the number of persons that we have attending training, because I think the training is good training. I think we have to do a better job of coming back and reporting and sharing with the board as a whole the things that we learn. But I was mentioning at the last meeting, our travel and scheduling. I think there's money that we could save, I'm guessing, about $5,000 in lodging and travel costs if we restrict our travel and attendance to the specific days of content that's taking place when we go to some of these conferences. So I mentioned I went to Great City Schools and Q this year. But based upon the days where, the actual good stuff was going on, I probably spent a day more on the front end than I needed to, and an extra day on the back end. So if you just take one person and you calculate just the lodging and the per diem, I think that might be some areas that we could potentially reduce the cost associated with travel and lodging without eliminating the, again, the professional development that takes place at those conferences. But I definitely think if we just decided to forego the streaming piece, which everybody knows I'm an advocate for streaming and the technology, but that's a $10,000 chunk right there. Unless later we find out that the cost associated with what we have now is so great that there's some savings there, but at least for a potential placeholder until we deal with the big picture, that would be one area I think we could do some immediate savings.
One recommendation, the COSA conference, we could possibly suspend that for next year. That's the one where our school attorney attends. And there's also a component with VSPA that in June, so we could probably forego that, and that would save about $3,000. Do you see that?
What?
It's the one right above governance training. It says Council of School Attorney.
What page are you on?
On the page 4, on the detailed travel.
Oh, okay.
Page 4.
Now, you're making that recommendation?
I'm making that recommendation that we could suspend that conference for this year. and just leave the school law conference in June.
Well, our attorney typically takes advantage of that.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd be uncomfortable making that decision without consulting with,
I've already talked to
oh, they're okay with it? Okay. Brett?
To Rodney's point, anytime that you can save on travel costs is a good thing. The challenge that we face here in Norfolk is trying to get the flights. That's where you're dealing with the flights too. By the time the conference ends, there's no flight to get out of that particular city and back to Norfolk, so you have to stay the night after. And vice versa, to get there on time, you have to leave the day before to get there. So I know anytime you look for it, absolutely.
But with some of them, like Council of Great City Schools, they, on the front end, they have, the first day is like a reception. It's not any real meat of the conference on that first day. And then I know when we were in Indianapolis, the last day, the Indy 500. I'm getting me a flight home. So I think there are a couple of cases where we could, I'm not sure we would say 5,000 there, but I'm sure, I think with Courtney and Noel rooming together with Rodney and Ed, and then Brad and.
Brad, you still-
I do.
I'm not going with her.
And Ed, you wouldn't mind taking the bus up there, would you?
Always hitchhiker. One of the things that I noticed at those conferences is, first of all, they've been great for me in terms of learning.
We know.
Yes. I emphasize learning. So I see whole school boards at these conferences. We send one or two, and most districts are sending multiple numbers of school board members because they see the value of the training and for their governance teams. And so I would not, I would discourage us from reducing the attendance at these critical conferences because I believe that they are critical for our training. And I believe that at least 2 school board members should go, at least.
Okay.
Dr. Houston,
Yeah.
in the spirit of what Mr. Jordan brought up,
Mhm.
right now, Ms. Banks, under Fern Advocacy Institute, if I'm the person attending next year, I think we could half the transportation cost, and I think we could third. I remember we took one night off of the hotel, and you know what the cost is, because we spent hours figuring that out. So we could probably cut under meals and lodging by a third under that. That saves $250 and $300 we could be saved in transportation. And I'm pretty sure that gives us a small buffer on that. That doesn't, it saves $500, but still that's $500. What do you think, Ms. Banks? I don't know what the hotel cost was per night.
For those,
Yeah. Anyway, I think we
Sure
could,
it's in
I think we could,
Alabama.
I think we could half the transportation costs, and I think we could reduce a third by that, and that saves $550.
All right, can I draw a conclusion to this conversation where I think that we have found that we can do 10,000 in the video and we can be very conscientious of our travel, and that we could probably get additional 5 out of that to get us up to 15 and change, nearly 16, that gets us to the 5% reduction.
And that's not cutting out the one woman per conference.
It is just being very conscientious of how we spend our travel dollars throughout the year, regardless of where the travel happens.
Okay. Now, in this 15%, 5%, did we take into consideration the increase of VSPA?
The 20 is already built into it.
It's already built
Okay,
into it.
okay. All right.
The other thing I'll just add to that is just to reserve the right to come back for further discussion of the extra staff.
and I have a job description or anything. Is
No,
already
I just, I mean,
available if you want to look at it.
as we deal with the bigger picture, and if we find ourselves dealing with challenges with, teachers and principals and others. I just think we have to come back and look at that, because if we find that we're gonna be asking I know we're trying to protect our student-teacher ratios and other things, but if we find that we have to make some adjustments in the classroom, then I just think we may have to be prepared to deal with, some challenges and adjustments here.
Yeah,
So,
and I know one of the things we talked about in the past as well is there may be a situation where a person may be shared, I mean, Sam would know better the needs here in central administration, but, okay,
Well,
I'm sorry.
alo-
Go ahead.
right. Along that line, if we've not done a comparative analysis of systems our size and how this is structured, then that brings additional information to the table for the board to review along the line of what Mr. Jordan just mentioned. And of course, that can happen. There are examples of systems our size within our state, of course, and how they have structured their organization. And that doesn't mean we have to copy that, but it gives us a point of reference. Of course, I know examples of outside of the state, but I would prefer to look at inside of Virginia and comparable systems of, in terms of size, and then you all will have it, and then you can just review it and make decisions accordingly based on new staff and all the requests that you all speak to. So you all just let me know if you want me to have somebody to do that.
Right.
Typically, that would be our Human Resources Department that could do that.
I just want to, I know this is a discussion for later, but I want to put on the table, we were here as board members when Janelle was doing all the work by herself. And one of my prime emphasis was to get her some help. That's why we had the part-time help. I don't want us to be a penny wise and a pound foolish. I mean, I'm very much for saving money wherever we can. But when you see how spread thin she becomes trying to do all that she's responsible for, I think we've really got to eke out a deputy somehow, some way.
obviously, you all have more experience with it than I. As you were saying that, I think the other, I like the recommendation. I know we looked at, last year, we were looking at some of the salaries. We did do some comparison, so I think at least having that comparison would be a good thing.
Right.
The other piece that just came up, as we move to Board Docs Pro, hopefully that'll provide some efficiencies. And if nothing else, it ought to cut down at least 6 packets of, paper and everything that we do. So, I'm telling you, there's a lot of money that we spend.
Yes.
In the back of my truck, I probably have 10 binders that I just need to bring back to you. And I just think if we adapt to the technology and some of the efficiencies, there should be some cost savings there as well. Just the whatever you spend having somebody deliver packages to our houses, I just think is something that, we can potentially cut down, if not cut out.
Are we gonna have discussion on other parts of the budget? The only reason why, I'd hate for us to spend so much time on so little money and not have time to spend on the bigger
Yes.
budget. Since I didn't attend the last meeting, I'd like the opportunity to ask or say a few things in that. And I'm not trying to bring closure here, but I think I am.
Yeah. I think
Courtney,
Courtney
I
brought
thought that was
closure
well
already.
done. I thought she did a good job.
So, in recapping the school board budget, our goal was to cut a goal of 5%. We've done that. The streaming piece, can you tell me what page that's on real quick? Rodney?
That's on page 1.
Page 1.
I'm sorry, no, it's on page 2.
Page 2. Organizational memberships, okay. So we're gonna cut the streaming, we're going to ask for donations for the new computers that we need. I think it's 2 systems, but we're still gonna keep that in the budget for this point in time. We're going to consider contracting out our meal services to see if there's a benefit and savings there to a local Norfolk business. As far as the professional staff, we are fine with accepting that, but we would probably like to consider a comparison for other, like school boards, our size. And then finally, savvy travel spending. Done.
Did you say the 10,000 video services?
Yes, 10,000 video services, streaming, $10,000.
Removal.
Okay. We're good. All right, thank you all. That was painless. Okay, no need for a break, I don't think. We can continue on with item 2.01, community engagement presentation. Dr. King?
Chairman Houston, members of the board, community engagement, 2.01, consisting of communications and public relations update, A+ partnership. Ms. Mather?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, and I will just pull out my glasses so I don't lose sight again like I did at another board meeting. I do have them. Oh. Okay. Do they have it? They've got it? Okay. All right. Yes. So the PowerPoint is in your packets, I'm told. I will be presenting an update today on our web redesign efforts. Appreciate the opportunity to do so. I provided you all with some preliminary information back before the holidays. This is an updated version of that, so I'll just run through it very quickly because you would have already had an opportunity to see this. We are very pleased to be pretty far along in a long-term effort to update and put on a continuous improvement cycle our websites for the school division. And this has been a phased effort that actually began back in 2012 with a complete redesign of our main Norfolk Public Schools website, the home pages, and all of those things associated there. We updated the platform, the navigation, and the content based upon a significant amount of feedback from our stakeholders over time. It was made searchable for the first time, many improvements there. We're pleased to tell you that we're seeing a proportional growth over time. We've had traffic increase when we first measured the changed website from January to August 2012, then January to August 2013. We had a 25% increase over time, and then from September to January of this year, compared to September, January of last year, we're at about a 38% increase in traffic. And the feedback that we're getting is that people are finding what they're looking for. We're going for high utility and being able to find it quickly and easily. Beginning in the spring and ongoing, we were into a new phase. The division strategic plan incorporated the overall web redesign. We're very pleased to say that although the strategic plan outlined this as an item that would continue into further phases, in terms of the redesign, we are going to be largely complete this year in year one, phase one. So we're very excited about that, while also moving forward on the other items related to community engagement and communications that we're actually deadlining for year one, phase one. So we're really pleased about that. A lot of hard work from our gentlemen on the web team. New school websites launched on August 28th, and we've seen a tremendous amount of traffic increase to our schools. Our schools are putting a lot of really relevant news on their front pages. Parents and students are really loving it. We're getting positive feedback from them. The calendar items are right there on the front pages for the schools. That's the kind of thing that people want to see. Phase 3, fall 2013 and ongoing, the redesign of all departmental websites. They were on an old platform. That platform we're phasing out as we go along. We've launched more sites since what I sent you in a PowerPoint prior to the holidays. Human Resources is live. Norfolk Education Foundation has been redesigned. School Leadership, Teaching and Learning's main site. ARA, Assessment, Research, and Accountability. Curriculum and Instruction actually is in its second version of a redesign, and they were really our first, kind of our test case. And we saw when we launched last year their first version of the website, and this is a crazy figure, but it was 13,000% increase in their traffic, because we made them, it was much easier to find them, and we targeted exactly what information people would need to know from their site. Human Resources, just to give you a little bit of a sense, they launched on December 2nd, and for the month of December, we saw a 77% increase in traffic to their site from the prior December. And you'll see more sites continuing to launch as time goes on. Phase 4, which continues now, is really aligned with our student information systems changeover, where you'll see teacher websites integrate into that platform, and parents can go and log on and find out the important information that they need to know about their children's assignments, the grades, everything integrated into one place. And we're working, of course, with information technology to make sure that that is communicated out to all of our stakeholders as that transition occurs. And that is an update on our website changes. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Just a comment. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Mack. You pinpointed during that version of your presentation, strategies 1 and 2, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You may not be prepared to do so at this point, but I would like to also provide at some point to the board with the actions that you just described, which action plans and steps that activity really aligns with, linking to strategies 1 and 2. You following?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so you don't have to do that now unless you have it with you. But I think that's information that will help the board as it kind of monitors how we're moving forward with implementing these strategic plans.
Great, and actually, prior to the holidays, when we were originally on the agenda, we had provided an updated strategic plan worksheet that identified the plan number, if you'll recall, and the actual plans and where we were in terms of percentage complete there. And I can reprise that and send it out again, if that would be helpful to you all. We will also provide an updated worksheet on all of the action plans and which strategies they're aligned with and what percentage completion when we do the March update on the strategic plan. We're well in progress. As a matter of fact, some members of my team and I had a meeting today to talk about, getting that ready for you all for the March update.
2 quick questions.
Yes.
Several months ago, you talked about reaching out to other districts and seeing what their social media policy was like for their divisions.
Yes.
Have you done that, and do we have one in place?
A social media policy is in progress with, in collaboration, our Human Resources Department is taking the lead on developing that, and it is currently it is in draft form and with the attorneys and in review by multiple members of the cabinet to look at it and look at implications. And yes, we have reached out to other districts as part of that process of developing, and also other organizations, not just other districts, but other localities, other entities in terms of that.
And have you been able to engage in a monitoring policy for social media so we know what others are saying of us in the universe?
So thank you for that. Yes, you actually presented a couple of very good suggestions for social media monitoring companies to look into, and I priced several of them. They were in the $10,000 to $20,000 range, which was frankly out of our budget. So we are continuing to leverage the free tools that are there, yes.
And I only ask the question, honestly, it's just important for us to hear what others are saying of us in the universe of social media, because they're saying it whether or not we're listening. So there are great tools out there, so I appreciate your using whatever, because I think it's just important from a reputation and a brand perspective from us to understand what others are saying.
This probably is a question related to things to come, but it's a question I've asked before. It's a one-word question with a question mark. App.
Yes, sir.
Anything to come?
Yes.
Good.
We actually already have an app in our school nutrition, which, as you all know, is a very high-value item to our consumers. And we launched that, the school nutrition department took the lead, but we collaborated in terms of publicizing that app, and it's on the streets. It's terrific. If you have children in the schools and are not signed up for it, you should be. It's wonderful.
But expansion. in the word
Expansion,
app.
yes, because the web redesign that we're doing now provides us a tremendous number of opportunities to have apps that speak directly to utility calendar information, for example. So we are definitely looking at that. Right now, you can find many, many, many vendors who will come in and spend your money developing an app for you. We actually have the technical capability to develop our own. We just have 2 guys, so we're working and getting the websites redesigned, and we'd really like to be able to use our own technology to do
Just
it.
as a dream, when CTE is fully operational, I see our students doing it for us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We have students that can do it now, just for the record.
That's right.
And they may
You're
be
right.
too young.
You're
just-
right.
just
And
for-
and speaking to your point, in Virginia Beach, they have a wonderful program that I love where students actually teach community members technology courses. It's fantastic, so.
Just for clarity on the app for the public, can you just describe again, you said there's a nutrition app that we should be using? Is that what that
School
is?
nutrition app, it's actually advertised on our homepage right now, npsk12.com at the top. We have a banner, if you click on it, it'll show you how to sign up for the app.
You're not talking about the one that pay your fees online, is that what you're talking about?
No, sir, I'm talking about one that offers you your menus and your nutrition information for all meals.
Oh, okay.
Yes. No, we do have, obviously, you can pay
Yeah, I use
through the
that.
Meal Pay
Yes.
Plus, but that's a different thing.
Congratulations.
Any other questions about web? Also, I want to give a shout out to the folks on our team who are working on this effort. Their efforts are gaining attention across the region. We just last week, or the 21st, I guess it was, right before the first snowstorm, participated in a conference call with Fairfax County Public Schools. As you know, the largest school division in Virginia. They're looking to copy our methodology for how we've rolled out our web redesign. So we're very excited about that. Okay, and then the only other thing I had wanted to just have an opportunity to address you about is related to the video coverage. You all have just discussed that during your conversation about your budget. Hi, Carlos. And as you can see, this year we have pulled together a plan to make sure that we are here streaming work sessions and board meetings. And we have a wonderful dedicated crew. They were here during the snowstorm last week. Really, really appreciated them. I have streamlined my own presentation just to get you right to the heart of it here, which is the recommendation that we do, as a division, want to do this service for our community, and people are paying attention. I'm getting messages, when is the board meeting coming on? We recommend that you invest in the equipment necessary to actually make that consistent, make it a very positive presence for the community, get this space continuously set up for that, so that whenever you have an opportunity to meet, we can be ready for you.
So, major budget implications for the budget we're currently working on, that's a question. Is that a?
Well, we also are investigating some creative ideas. Andrea and I were talking about the potential of looking at ERate funding. There are some ideas, but we would recommend that investment at the earliest opportunity.
I guess what I'm asking is, has that been included in the budget plans? I mean, I know we don't have the proposed budget yet, but as we look at the funding gap, have we considered some hard and fast numbers for the improvement of this service?
Live streaming in terms of the cost, I don't believe is in the budget yet.
It's not in the gap.
So if that's something that we want to include, then I would, certainly ask that we get some numbers so we can really see clearly what that looks like and how it impacts the current planning.
Do we have a rough estimate?
This initial, regardless of whether method you use, internal or external service, it's gonna be about a $50,000-$60,000 setup cost to get the cameras and initial equipment in place. So whether we use our internal channel 47 or we use, an external service like Scenario or so forth, it's always still gonna be an initial setup cost.
Okay. And are we considering this room?
So, yes.
So I'm just trying to understand what we're talking now. Are we talking mounted?
Robotic cameras.
Yes,
Yes.
robotic cameras.
Okay, obviously remotely operated.
And microphones and lighting and all of that.
Right. It looked like we did a cost assessment of that earlier this year, did we not?
It was about $60,000 was
Okay.
the estimate. Now, that was without benefit of a formal, but that's about right. And Janelle is absolutely correct. We talked about this,
Okay.
that no matter which service you use, you're going to incur that setup fee.
Sure. Okay, so if it's something as the Budget Advisory Committee works together, that we find valuable and necessary for this coming year, and we need to take that into consideration.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? How much does it cost us to do what we're doing right now without that setup, if we were to do that for another year? Do you have
We
that?
can cost that out for you in terms of staffing cost and equipment. There's the other opportunity cost as well in terms of the setup that's required each time, going back and forth, because when we are doing this, we're also not at other events that we can be showcasing for the community.
Yeah, I think, let's get a comparison at least, so that we know what we're spending today and what it would cost for another 12 months to do this, in addition to the 50,000-60,000 setup and additional streaming cost.
We can provide you with that.
Yeah, and I think in addition to those numbers, what you just mentioned, sometimes it's hard to kind of, quantify that impact, where right now we have 3 camera persons, and I imagine somewhere producer, obviously.
We have several people downstairs. Yes.
Yeah, and that's a good point you make, that with mounted, remotely controlled cameras, we'll probably do the job with half the number of people, if not more than half the amount of people, and that the persons could be doing other things. I think they need to be included in the report, though, so that we're looking at, at things that are difficult oftentimes to quantify. Did you have a comment?
Oh, I know that we had considered maybe the workspace area that city council uses for their work sessions, and
Mhm.
logistically, that might just be too difficult to make sure that we're on the schedule, they're on the schedule, and then the ease of the staff
Mhm.
with traveling. So I'm assuming that option is not on the table anymore. I mean,
Yeah.
it just seemed like there were a lot of barriers to that option.
Yeah, I wouldn't quickly support that. Rodney?
Just in terms of process, so and we kind of touched on this as we were going through the previous, I guess, our budget.
Mhm.
Wouldn't it just be easier to say right now that we would like to do it,
Mhm.
and then just ask, as the superintendent and his administration are preparing that budget for us, to bring that forward, and then when we can see the big picture, we can see whether or not we can do it. For me, it's a little awkward trying to talk about that now without
Right.
seeing the rest of the picture. And I think from a priority standpoint, if we
Right.
say that's something that we value and like to see continued, just share that with the superintendent, and then he can factor that into, he and Dr. Thornton and others, with all the things they're gonna bring back to us, and then we can.
No, I agree, and
Okay.
that's essentially what I was saying, because it sounds like Elizabeth was making a request, a recommendation to the board, and I was simply saying it should be considered in the budget planning process. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Thank you. And we applaud the continued growth and development
Great.
of the communications department, and we all see the difference that it's making. And we certainly appreciate the additional effort in the streaming. I know some major adjustments had to be made to the work schedule and make sure we could man this properly for the streaming, and so, thank you.
I just rather have a friend who volunteered after seeing me on the last one, volunteered to get free makeup and follicle challenge. So if you get to the point where you need to have free services in that area for the face and the follicle challenge, to be happy.
As long as we can take a picture while it's in progress, would you be okay?
Now, I'm not sure if Brad, Ed, or I should be offended with the
I
follicle
wasn't looking
challenge.
I wasn't looking at any one particular person.
Now, Dr. Stork, was this when you were on the phone?
I regret now bringing that up.
Yeah, I had a patient
Brad, I was not
recognize me
looking
in
at
the
you.
ER because they were watching the streaming. So that was the first time anybody had ever done that before. So kudos to you guys. They're watching it. The student was watching it. So not just the parent.
Yeah. Good job.
Thank you.
All right, good afternoon. The Norfolk Education Foundation portion of this with community engagement. Do apologize to the board, but you all should have received it in the update. To date, just in big numbers here, 2,146 participants from the community have signed up through the online process to become volunteers within our schools. And as you can see, we've kind of broken this down here in the tracking, those who are approved, not approved, verified, meaning that we have completed their verification and just waiting to place them, and then those who are unverified, meaning those individuals who are in the queue in the process of the verification. We're also breaking that number down to also track the number of individuals who are mentors, as well as the individuals from the military community who are participating in the program.
Coordination for the mentoring component.
That is handled through Dr. Lance's department. We're just handling the background verification portion of that.
Is becoming much more efficient than it was last year.
Yeah, we have moved from a paper-based to an electronic base, and in the last report that I had given you all back in December, we're looking at a third-party vendor, BIB, who's going to be utilizing their services. So we're looking at the budget piece of that, and then also how we can incorporate that into our structure. So
when would that come online?
we're looking for a July 1 launch.
Because I know that a number of people who have spoken to me about their desire to do mentoring in public schools have stated that it's been difficult to get through the verification process, and that has been a discouragement to them. So I'm so glad to see that you're moving towards a more efficient third-party system.
Yeah, we moved from a process that may have been 3 months to not finding their paperwork getting lost to now a process where 10 days or less they are. But the second level, what we have a level 1 and level 2. And level 2 are those individuals who have direct contact with our students, either in tutoring or mentoring. Those type of verifications take a lot more time. And so if we're out snow days or if there's a holiday, those can get backed up. So having a vendor come on board to be able to take care of that for us. And we've been able to streamline that pricing to about $12.50. And so we're just trying to identify how we go about funding that particular piece. But we're looking at everything from badges, that they would handle everything, contact with the individual, but it would all be web-based so that our schools could log on, and just very much similar to what we're doing right now. Everybody can kind of, on the school administration side, could see who's been approved, and kind of speeding that process up. If we do go with BIB, they can guarantee turnaround time in about 48 hours for us. And so Our focus is on the customer service piece there to the community and to make sure that we can get them in the doors and be satisfied with the process. Okay. The next item that you'll have there, didn't have an opportunity to talk about it, but this year the Norfolk Education Foundation and Norfolk Public Schools participated in a worldwide program called Giving Tuesday. And just wanted to share a little bit of information about that. But it really is an opportunity, just like you kind of have Black Friday, but it's a way of galvanizing individuals in the community to focus on giving, and whether or not it's your time, your resources, your talent. And so we did some social media campaigns around that in the community, and just trying to kind of dabble into that one. It was very successful for us in our first year, and we are putting it into our main planning for 2014. And we're going to look at having some additional activities and also looking at things that we could do at the schools, particularly on the volunteer base there. So that's what we're looking for. I wanted to share that with you, that we did that, and that we will continue to do that as another one of our programs for 2014. Noble Hour is our online volunteer community. Just want to let you know we're continuing along with the beta testing with that. Right now, mentoring, they are using their various groups right now to populate activities and also track the hours. We're looking for a complete rollout of that as well on July 1, which will allow us to provide you at the school board level and across administration, being able to look at exactly and pinpointing the number of hours and activities from which the community members are participating in, and how they're driving their community investment back in the public schools. So just want to let you know that that process is ongoing, and that we are looking at a July 1 launch on that, and that it is a completely online system. And so each one of our schools will have their own community, will group within the Norfolk Public Schools community. So that's what the page there. The other thing I will draw your attention to is in the right corner. It talks about our noble impact. One of the things that we want to be able to do is to quantify the value of hours and the amount of time, because everyone knows that time is money. And so when you can put a value around that, it creates greater importance, and it helps us to create the opportunity in helping us to create our story and our need. So being able to kind of put some numbers around that one and to be able to demonstrate that this is what the impact of what the community is doing, we're looking at that will be very beneficial for us going forward. The last item there is Principal for Day, which is next Wednesday. And right now we have 61 participants. This year's target was 55. And so we are above that target. We wanted to increase it by 10% each year. And so we're currently in the matching process, and as soon as I finish this meeting here, I'll complete that and get that out to the principals, and they will make contact with their various partners. Ariane Van Buren from the Hampton Road Show is going to be one of our principals for a day, and so we will get some great media coverage out of the Hampton Road Show and what she's going to do, and kind of going behind the scenes and looking at what it means to be a principal and inside our schools there.
We have more than one, obviously, in some of the schools.
Yes, we do. A perfect example, Granby High School has 5. And one of the things that we mentioned is that some of the schools have learning communities, so Granby, being the IB program, was a great way of kind of breaking that down and putting them into the different clusters that they have there. We have a lot of different people from a lot of different industries who are participating. Norfolk Southern's participating, the president of Centera is participating, various members, and as you can see, we've partnered with the Chamber of Commerce and Lead Hampton Roads, and we're very happy to partner with us there. And so this is a great way to allow members of the business community and the broader community to become champions and be able to see what really goes on behind those school doors, and to become potential champions for Norfolk Public Schools and public education as a whole. Yes. Did I say something else? What's up there? Oh, February 12th. February 13th is probably up there because it's Tie Awards, and that's the only thing that's on my brain. I have been trying to, since it normally happens in November, and then of course we had to move it to January. And I'm liking the weather forecast. They're saying no major snowstorms Someone tried to scare me with 15 inches of snow. But as you can see, we're going to use the momentum of Principal for a Day on February 12th, and then the very next day, February 13th, will be the tie awards. And it has actually worked out for some, but I think for the greater portion there, we're going to have about 500 people. We were anticipating 400 originally, but the change of date has actually allowed us to increase more individuals and more tables to come in. So great event. We have about 119 items in our silent auction. We're going to announce today the 2 student MCs, a freshman and a senior from Booker T. Washington High School. And so the students, it will have a totally different flair than what you've seen in the past. It will be very student-focused and oriented. And we've had a great committee of community volunteers and staff members who've helped to put on this event. So it's going to be a great day. All right. Any additional questions? You know, the secondary had the accountability chart, and so I think member Courtney Dole for her feedback there, and so you can see the actual numbers in the areas and where we're moving with our fundraising, and as well as the other activities that we're working with there. We've launched for the golf tournament, and I thank the board again for moving your date. We're going to stay with the lucky day, so it's going to be the third Wednesday in June, and we'll be back at Cypress. I don't know, but I appreciate it. I don't know, you're going to be out there golfing this year, right, Dr. Hughes?
Oh, to be sure.
Okay, so, are
Courtney's
there any
giving me some
questions?
more classes.
Any additional questions?
Carlos, just thank you for putting the sheet together, because it really does tell the picture of where you are year to date. So thank you for setting the goal, where you are, where you think you're headed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What was that date, June?
It should be June the 18th. Now, I do understand it's right after graduation, so it's going to be Monday, Tuesday, and then golf tournament.
I was just going to ditto the report. I appreciate how you highlighted, what we needed to see. I can follow the chart well. I can see your progress, and so the highest thank you I can give you, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Oh, and thank you, appreciate for that. And I want to publicly thank on behalf of the Norfolk Education Foundation, Ms. Courtney Dole for her support to the foundation and the in-kind gift that you're presenting on a monthly basis. We thank you for that support.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
This is Wednesday, February 13th.
Yeah, no. It's going to be Wednesday, Principal for a Day. We're just going to hope that Dr. Stewart will bring some of this heat that he brought back from Florida, right?
And close for the emperor. All right, item 2.02, we have a report on our KPMG audit review. They here? Okay. Sam, any comments? All right. Dr. Thornton,
Thank you, Chairman Houston, School Board members, Dr. King, good afternoon.
good afternoon.
I'm pleased to invite today and introduce to you all members of KPMG, Ms. Cheryl Sistros, who is a managing partner of KPMG, and her colleague and associate Garrett Berger. They were the audit firm that conducted the required annual external audit of the school division's financial operations, financial statements. I'm pleased to say that they have a very positive report in keeping with our standard here, so with no further ado, I'll turn it over to them and let them make the formal presentation to the school board.
Well, thank you very much for giving us some time today. I guess the third time's the charm in making this meeting happen, but we do appreciate it. And I guess, I'd like to start by thanking Dr. Thornton and his staff for all the assistance and hospitality they extended to my team while we were here performing the audit. It's never fun to be audited, and they did a great job of helping us work through the process as efficiently as possible. I've provided for you a few slides that we'll use to frame the discussion, but the discussion is really covering what's included in 3 letters, which I think you should have in your board docs. One of them is the required communications related to our audit of the school board. And then we have a similar letter related to our audit of the student activity funds of the schools. And then we also have an internal control letter related to that. And all of this relates back to the comprehensive annual financial report of the schools, which was issued right before the holidays, and I think you all have seen. So we'll just walk through the presentation. Let me flip this. Can I do it? Okay, great. There we go. Okay, so our discussion today will cover the communications that I'm required to make to you as the governing body of the school board regarding the conduct of the audit. It will also cover a discussion of our A133 audit, which is the audit of the federal grants. The school's federal grants are audited in conjunction with the City of Norfolk because of the relationship between the entities, so that the report related to that audit doesn't actually appear in your comprehensive annual financial report, but we always like to go ahead and let the school board know, which grants we audited and what the results of that were. And then we'll talk for a few minutes about our audit of the student activity funds. So first, the required communications. We have completed our audits, and we did issue the reports right before the holidays. The first section of the letter, if you were looking at the letter, talks about what an audit is and what it isn't. That we look at internal controls for purposes of scoping, but we don't give an opinion on internal controls. And, that our goal is to find material errors, which means that we may not find all errors. We also communicate to you, if you have looked at the comprehensive financial report, you know that there's a lot of information in there in addition to the financial statements. There's a management's discussion and analysis where Dr. King and Dr. Thornton will talk about how they analyze the numbers. There's some statistical information. And, we're letting you know that while we haven't audited that information, we have read it to make sure that it's consistent with what we know, as a result of performing the audit. The next section of the letter and required communications deals with accounting policies and alternative treatments. The accounting policies that the school board uses are included in the first note to the financial statements, and it does describe those in detail. There were no unusual transactions entered into this year other than, and I'm sure most of you are aware of this, the way that the City of Norfolk chose to handle the school buses for the prior year, where rather than provide the funds and then have the school board purchase the buses, the city purchased the buses and contribute them. And it just changed the way that those buses were accounted for a little bit. Like especially the place you would notice it the most is in the page in the financial statements that shows the budget versus actual financials, because they were not part of the school board's budget, although they did come in as assistance to the entity. Qualitative aspects, we are required to discuss with you if we have any concerns about the accounting principles that the management of the school board has chosen. If we think they're not conservative or there would be a better alternative, and we don't have any concerns. I know we've communicated that before. The accounting principles that have been chosen are appropriate in the circumstances. Management judgments and accounting estimates. There are a couple of estimates in the financials, and we do discuss those with you briefly just because they are subject to judgment in terms of how that rolls forward. The schools have an accrual for self-insurance, and then they also have a post-employment benefits obligation, which is basically the retiree health insurance of the schools that are recorded. An outside actuary is employed by the schools for both of those liabilities, and in auditing them, we have an actuary that works at KPMG take a look at what those folks have done. And, we're able to conclude that the liabilities were reasonable and don't have any concerns related to the assumptions that were chosen or any of the other aspects of those liabilities. I'm not going to go through this in detail because we did have a meeting with your audit committee of the school board right immediately after the holidays. But if you look at the back of each letter, we do provide you with a list of items that came up during the audit that were not material enough to adjust, and a couple of things that maybe adjustments that we made as part of the audit. They do net to a very small number. We're not concerned at all with the materiality of those. But I won't go through them in detail just because it would make for a more lengthy presentation. We did go through them in detail with the audit committee at our meeting in early January. We had no disagreements with management. There were no consultations with other accountants. And we do confirm that we were independent with respect to the schools in performing the audit. We also note for you in the letter that because of the vacancy, which has now been filled by Ms. Felton over here, in the school's accounting function at the time this audit was performed, we were engaged to prepare the CAFR for the schools, just to provide assistance in getting through that process on a timely basis. Under government auditing standards, schools management is required to take responsibility for it. We're simply compiling, and all of those standards were complied with throughout that process. But we did want to communicate to you that we did take a little bit larger role than would be typical in preparing the CAFR just to get over the hurdle until that position was filled. Okay. The next slide deals with the A133 or federal grant audit and a couple of internal control matters related to the school board's audit. In conjunction with the City of Norfolk's A133 audit, we did audit 2 programs at the schools this year. The School Improvement Grants Cluster, which was selected because of it still had some ARA stimulus funds in it this year, which does tend to gear a program towards selection. And then Title I was tested, which Title I is actually the largest program that the City of Norfolk has as well. So it's pretty difficult for that one to not always be in scope in terms of how we address the entity from an overall perspective. We did have one finding that came out of the audit, and it really resulted from some changes in the way local governments are procuring these days versus, the old days. It used to be everybody would buy what they needed on their own, go through a procurement process. And now, for efficiency purposes, there's a lot of, I guess what I'll call piggyback procurement that occurs where either a cooperative is used or, in the state of Virginia, when an RFP goes out, they'll ask the vendor, is it okay if other localities, buy from this RFP? And it obviously is a great way for more efficient, procurement. There's a requirement when an expenditure is being made for a federal grant that there be a check to make sure that the vendor that's being utilized is not suspended or debarred, meaning they can't do business with the federal government. And there's 3 different ways you can do that. You can either put it in the contract, you can get them to certify as part of the procurement process that they're not suspended or debarred, or you can look them up on a website that the federal government maintains. And in some of these piggyback procurements, there wasn't a clear trail of documentation that that suspension and debarment check had been performed, simply because, you didn't have the contract because you didn't enter into it initially, or, we didn't have all the paperwork associated with the procurement. All the vendors were checked, none were suspended or debarred. So there's no question costs, no issues with, any of the dollars that actually went out the door on the grant. And so the recommendation that we've made is that, you just need to make sure in the case of those piggyback procurements that you either get the documentation that the initial procurer obtained to check suspension and debarment, or check it on the website. I mean, easy enough to do. I mean, I think it can be corrected going forward fairly easy. It's one finding. The requirements in Title I are extremely complex, so it's a good report to have something like this that is just a byproduct of something you're doing to improve efficiency, rather than, anything to be concerned about in terms of how the grants are being managed. In terms of internal control, because of the vacancy in, the accounting function throughout the majority of the year, we did assess that the schools had a significant deficiency in control because of the key role that that position plays in the review and the preparation of the data and the financial reporting. Obviously, that's been resolved because the position's been filled. But I think that was appropriate in the circumstances because there is a little more risk in the financial reporting function when you're short, a key position. I think we had a similar situation 2 or 3 years ago with the same treatment. Okay, so KPMG also audited the student activity funds, and actually the delays in the meeting allowed us to get this report in at the same time as the other one, as that report was just issued right after the first of the year. The student activity funds are the funds that the schools take in from parents and other sources and use for field trips and that type of thing. We did visit all the schools and audit those funds. There were a couple of significant deficiencies noted. I mean, one of them relates to the maintenance and retention of records. A lot of times there are bookkeepers, that are doing this work that have other jobs, and a few things were missing. We did have one instance where with Campus Stella Elementary, because of the construction, the records were moved like a couple of different times, and a lot of the support was lost. Now, the good news is, the bank statements are all there, and the receipts you can recreate from the bank statements, and the dollars that went out the door you can recreate from the bank statements. And because of the limited activity in the school, it was a very small amount of funds, like maybe $5,000 that even went in or out. So I would tell you, I think the risk that anything untoward happened, as a result of those missing records is very small. But obviously an issue to try to make sure we're keeping track of all that support out in the schools. And then, some of the bookkeepers do struggle a little bit with reconciling the bank accounts and knowing how to reconcile them. I mean, I know a new position has been put in place, somebody within the finance department here that will be able to work more closely with those bookkeepers moving forward, which should help alleviate, some of the difficulties that they have, just due to lack of sophistication and not working with this stuff, day in, day out. So that was the student activity funds. I mean, do you have any questions or anything for me? Yeah, sure.
I noted 2 very important things that you said that I'm very
Okay.
pleased about. No concerns, that's a good one. And no instances of noncompliance. So overall, and I know that we're all excited that Dr. Thornton is here.
Yes.
But on this one sheet, December 20th, letter to us, independent auditor's report, I'll give you a copy.
Okay.
You'll see where I've circled. I just want to translate that into my language, and that is, you're saying you hope that never happens again, where you have time between one person and.
That's right, that's right. Yes, this is the sheet that he's referring to is actually in the comprehensive annual financial report, and
Right.
it's the report on internal controls that we do under government auditing standards. And that's where we document the significant deficiency that we talked about,
Right.
which related to the open position. Yes.
Your hope, as ours, is that never
Right.
occurs again.
That's right,
And
that's
the
right.
most important part of that letter for me was, you said even that, the results of our test disclosed no instances of noncompliance.
Yeah, there's a second part of that report
Right.
that deals with compliance with laws and regs, and we did not note.
No concerns
issues
and
there.
no instances of noncompliance make me happy.
That's good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Or?
Chairman Houston, if I might acknowledge the accounting staff. We were an entire year without a senior director of accounting. We were very aggressively trying to recruit that position, but we did not want to just select anyone. We wanted to make sure we had the right person, the right seat for Norfolk Public Schools and what our challenges were. We think we found that person. Unfortunately, we found that person probably 2 weeks after the audit was completed. But I say that.
Because she was working on the audit
That's
sick.
here. We're very pleased to have Jeanette. But the staff that has been on board this last year has done a tremendous amount of work to get us where we found ourselves in this report. They stepped up things that they never had been required to do in the past as it relates to the audit process and getting the CAPR completed. They stepped up. We met on a weekly basis, and they really, really demonstrated that when they were faced with a new challenge, they could get it done in a quality way. So I'm pleased that Mr. Ray Reyes, the senior coordinator in accounting, Tiffany Spade, who's the senior coordinator in accounting, Erica Sawyer is not here today, but she's also part of the administrative team as well as their support staff. So I appreciate the work that they did, and we'll continue moving forward.
Well, we thank you for your lead.
Dr. King said stand.
Do stand.
Good job, good job.
And we have other staff members who don't work in the accounting department, but they are part of the finance team, and they make all of this work on a day-to-day basis.
Well, thank you, and we thank you for your leadership and support in this role, and for your entire staff. Certainly in an organization this size with the kind of budget and activity, financial activity, we know that this is a major, major undertaking, and I'm sure that recommendations have been made to address some of the issues and deficiencies that have been identified from the school level as a result to school funds and others. And I'm confident that we'll address those issues and avoid those deficiencies in the future.
And they've actually already been addressed.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, certainly, yes.
Add to kudos going out. When Ms. Doyle and I were on the audit committee, going through the process this year was, worked well. The information, the responses to the questions. Kudos to the Title I comment. I mean, that is a complicated thing, and so hearing that, that came out well was very good to hear. So just the process, I think, Dr. King and Dr. Thornton and the team have put in place really made the process very easy, very easy to follow. So I just wanted to also acknowledge that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you all for serving.
I'd also like to thank KPMG, good partners for us, thank you.
And partners also with PB Young. Remember at our January meeting or December where the feature
right.
was on the reading
Yeah,
day?
that's
It
right.
was Cheryl's firm who sponsored that
That was a
day.
real pleasure for us. It was a lot.
Well, thank you so much for your support.
The books and the reading and their time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right?
Thank
Take care. Okay. Good news is always good. Item 2.03 now, our Human Resources Report. Of course, always of grave concern to us is our competitive, well, our ability to compete with other districts in our region as it relates to salaries and benefits. And part of our strategic plan, one of our priorities, of course, is to attract and retain highly qualified, highly effective teachers, and we know that a part of that is pay. And so we've had a pay and classification study, or pay classification study conducted, and today we will get a report on that study. Dr. King, any comments?
Chairman Houston, members of the board, Dr. Birdsong and team, they are ready to move forward with providing results to you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Houston, members of the board, Dr. King. Thank you for this opportunity this afternoon to finally be able to present to you the results of the pay and classification study. As Dr. Houston mentioned, one of our school board priorities is to attract and retain highly effective and qualified staff. And so in so doing, we need to ensure that we are competitive in the market. So today I have with me Mrs. Carolyn Long, who is the Vice President of MAG, or Management Advisory Group. She actually facilitated and conducted the study for us, so she will be able to present the results for you this afternoon. And Mr. Frank Scott, who is our Human Resources Generalist. He was our champion with this project or this initiative, and so again, we're happy to present the results to you this afternoon. So if I may, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Long.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Superintendent, I want to start out by saying this is the culmination of over a year of very hard work. I want to thank Dr. Birdsong for the support and cooperation she's given us during this process, and particularly I have to thank Frank Scott. You know, when everybody always says, I couldn't have done it without you, well, I couldn't have done it without you. So he's put hundreds of hours into supporting this work. The scope of work for, make sure this is going to work. Yeah, the scope of work was to conduct a market analysis, to update the compensation plan for administrative and support staff, provide an equity analysis of the actual pay and make pay recommendations for administrative and support staff, and then provide implementation cost projections for the school. The results of the external market study, about 1/3 of the jobs that were surveyed were below market, 5% below market at the minimum. About 1/2 of the jobs surveyed were more than 5% below market at the maximum, and at the midpoint, and about 1/5 of the jobs were 5% or more below market at the maximum of the ranges. The survey was done in 2012-2013. In order for Norfolk Public Schools to be competitive for the 2014-2015 year, what we did was create a proposed salary schedule that would have been comparable to the market analysis done in 2013-2014. And then we aged that data, which is a funny way to put it because it really means moving it forward, not putting it back, but we aged the data by 2% to make sure that a July 1, 2014, for your 14-15 fiscal year, will continue to be competitive to the market. The finding of this, and if you look at 1/3 and 1/2 and 1/5, that sounds like it's really a lot, but my whole finding was that Human Resources had done an excellent job of being reasonably well competitive to the marketplace. And it was really, when I looked at the survey data, my first thought when I looked at it was, well, this is not too bad. The salary schedules look like they're in pretty good shape. Then I started running the implementation cost figures, and that's when the train jumped the tracks. Let's look at who the peers and competitors were, and I think you'll see that we did a very comprehensive survey, both locally and regionally, for the Norfolk Public Schools. Norfolk Public Schools' desire is to be globally competitive and a leader in the local market, not necessarily that you want to pay the most. And remember, when any of this that we're talking about is being benchmarked against the average of the market. So that means you're at the 50th percent. I mean, half of the money is above and half is below. So we're not benchmarking you against market maximums. I'm not going to read the list of schools. I think you'll recognize them. And what you do with the market data is you come back and you look at the benchmark positions, the job titles that we actually surveyed for. We put those into our new proposed salary structure, and then we say, where do the other jobs fit around this? So, and you survey for all the different occupational families and all the different levels in the organization. And then you build use that as sort of the model or the architectural design. Then you put the other jobs in and build your structure around that. We are recommending that the unified compensation plan would be adopted on July 1, 2014. Now, here's some of the changes that we recommended. The average of the market was 64.1%. The average of the range, the average of all of the ranges, which included both classified and administrative, was 68.8. Over a period of time, the classified and administrative step plan has become kind of raggedy. You know, the range widths are not uniform anymore. It's just years of tinkering with it. So, yes, ma'am.
When you're stating average range width was 64.1%, are you stating that when we are compared against the schools that you had listed previously, that we're at the 64th percentile?
No, ma'am.
Explain that to me a little bit more.
When we surveyed the external market, we did the average. Let's just take one job, for example, bus driver, and all of the pay ranges that we got for bus driver. Maybe some were 55%, maybe some were 70%, some were 60%. We averaged the range width of the external market for each job, and then collectively added those averages together. The point of that is nothing magic. It's just that when you're building a new compensation structure, what you want to have is some reason why you picked a range width. I mean, I'm always thinking if I have to explain something like this to the board and they say, well, why did you pick 64%? My response to the board is because that is the average range width of the market that you're in. So if you pick the average range width, you're more likely to be able to benchmark your positions accurately. So the minimum, the midpoint or market point, and the maximum of the ranges are going to fit into the new structure in a logical way without money hanging out on the bottom or on the top. I mean, just a way to come back and say to the board, there was some logic. I just didn't pick this number out of thin air. Does that make sense?
It helps, but I'm still confused about how, are you looking at salaries when you're when you just randomly, let's just say you looked at the bus driver, are you looking at their salaries and their benefits, or are you looking at their pay scale when you're plotting?
Okay, let me tell you that it's yes and yes. And yes, salary, market, benefits, and pay structure. So yes to everything you said. The first thing you do is survey the external market. We want to build that leg of the stool so that it's solid. We look at the external market. That's where I was saying, that's where I came up with the 64%, because that's the average width of the ranges of all the jobs that we surveyed from all of these competitors. Oh, from the entry level to the maximum of the range. So if somebody starts, let's say, to make it simple, you're a food service worker and you start at X dollars per hour with step one and X dollars per hour at the top of the range.
Okay.
So the range width is 60, on all of these jobs, we throw them into a big pot and average them all at 64%.
Okay.
So first question, that's where we get range width. The second question you asked was salaries. I'm going to get to that. The third question you asked was benefits. We did look at benefits, and not surprisingly, you're right in line with what the other school districts offer. I mean, there's nothing that I saw that I could come back and say, boy, you're really behind here, or wow, you're giving so much here, you can take away from that. You've got a standard government benefit package. And then there was a fourth point, and I forget what it was, but,
Do you all look at professional development?
I'm sorry?
Professional development?
No,
Okay,
no. That,
just curious.
yeah, this was just compensation.
That's fine.
Okay, and I know there was an important fourth point, but I swear I can't remember what it was. I'm sorry? Yeah, yeah. If we had a policy, I don't remember what it was. Anybody old enough than me to remember that one? Let's go on now. Let me go back just one thing. I got sidetracked here. So the pay structure itself is aligned with the average of the market point. So that's the average of the ranges, okay? Then the next step was to align the jobs internally, and I explained how we did that. We looked at the benchmark jobs and then used that as a reference point for placing other jobs into the system. You want to have a competitive posture at your market point, which is considered full proficiency pay for the job. You want to make the entry level competitive. You don't want to have your ranges so wide that you can't hire anybody because the bottom end of your range dips below the competitive market position. And our new structure reduces the top end of some of the ranges to make them more competitive with your external market. We're proposing that you migrate from a step plan, which I have a copy of here, to an open range plan, or what's commonly called a unified schedule. This has been around, it's nothing new. I can't think of any school district I've worked with where we have recommended anything other than a unified schedule. Virginia Beach, Fairfax County Public Schools, all of your large progressive school districts are migrating away from step plans.
I'm sorry. Could you briefly describe the difference?
Yes.
between the
Yeah. There's some real compelling things going on with the salary schedule and how employees here move through the ranges. And the changes that have taken place since 2006 and what's going on within the district. You had a pay study done in 2006 that was a 3-year implementation, and some of you may remember that. 2 years were implemented of it, then the third year, the economy kind of went to squash, and so that kind of fell off the radar scope. And from that point on, there were a number of years, I believe it was 4, where really basically no ranges were given. So now we were 2 years into a 3-year implementation plan, which suggested you were behind to break it into 3 years. And now we go 4 more years with no salary increases. And then the pay plan that you did have, the step plan you had, was 3% between steps, okay, and 5% between grades. That's what I call a conforming plan. It's sometimes called a 3x5. It's a conforming plan. It means it's consistent, so that you can look at it and you can project. Well, during all of this time of change and economic uncertainty and all, what happened was, instead of retaining that salary schedule, the board has made efforts to give increases to employees, so they've given an across-the-board increase or a flat dollar amount. So what's happened is that the actual pay table itself, which, if you want to take a look at it, has become, I don't know how to say this, kind of meaningless, because between like in the classified schedule, classified pay grade EE, for the first 3 or 4 steps, which supposedly reflect years of service, you've got 6 cents between steps. $12.21, then the next year's $12.27, and the year after that, $12.33. So you can see that what's happened is Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that if you're following this kind of schedule, even if you're giving across-the-board raises and trying to raise the whole schedule, nobody's going anywhere. You know, at a net effect of a 6 cent an hour raise, nobody's going anywhere. And so you just kind of need to know a little of the history before we get to the last page here and we see what the impact of this. This is what we would call a compressed salary schedule. So you've moved away from a conforming plan to a non-conforming plan, and consequently, as a result of the budgetary process squeezing this whole salary schedule down almost to a meaningless level. So you basically, going to a unified plan from this, you really haven't been on a step plan for a couple of years because you've said, okay, we're going to give everybody X dollars, or we're going to give everybody a flat percentage. So it's not really a step plan anymore. So if you just take this and say, this isn't working for us, and put it aside, then we're left with what are your best options? And of course, the most flexible option in uncertain times is an open range plan. Because the other thing that's wrong with a step plan is if somebody is $1 over a step and somebody else was hired 3 days after them and they're $1 under a step, that smart person that got hired 3 days first gets to go to the next step, and the other poor slob is stuck at the step below. So you can see. That's a technical term, sir.
HR is not most of our discipline, so I'm trying to get company in my misery, I guess. So without the step plan, you hire a teacher.
We're not doing instructional.
Okay.
Just non-instructional.
Gotcha.
And administrators.
Gotcha.
And administrators.
Okay.
No, I think you probably have done all right. I don't think there's been any real tinkering with the teacher schedule. We didn't study the teachers, so, but I think they're okay. I'm told that, so I assume that. Okay, so I guess what I'm really saying about the open range plan is this is not going to be like some great big wrenching difference, and you're asking employees to give up this wonderful, step plan that's working so well for them. When we get to how the implementation structure, then we'll see where it's not working for them, pretty much at all. Let's go to the implementation. We organized the employees in the district and the classified administrative schedules into departments so we could look at the fiscal impact in a similar fashion as your budgetary process. So we're using budget codes, not that that's, just for simplicity. And then we used criteria to say, okay, here's current state. We're over here. Here's current state. Here's proposed future state. How do we get people from current state to future state? And how do we do it fairly and equitably? And so what we did, and I used this kind of formula for almost every study I've done, and I've done hundreds of them, and probably more school districts in the last 5 or 6 years than any other bunch of firms combined. What we did was say, okay, we have to have a model, a criteria that we use to move people to this new plan. So let's pretend that the new plan represented a 25-year range, okay? So if I was hired at step 1 in this new plan and I stayed in that same job for 25 years, we're going to make the assumption that I should reasonably expect that I could get to the top of a range. Okay with that? Okay, then we made it even more conservative. We said, okay, it isn't going to apply to your hire date, it's going to apply to your promotion date. So it's 25 years in your current job. So you can see that for your administrative staff and your upper level, what I've done by choosing this kind of implementation criteria is weight the value of longevity toward the lower end of the scale, because there tends to be less promotion. There's less in-migration, there's less turnover, and of course, people who have been here a while are promoted. And we're making the assumption that when they were promoted, they got some adjustments to reflect that. But the effect of it is to advantage those people somewhat. But I think you have to either accept or just say we're not going to pay attention to it, that if you've spent 25 years in a job, you would expect that you might get to the top of the range. I mean, teachers do. They expect that. So I think for school systems, it's not what I would say a really radical concept. And the implementation date we chose was July 1, 2014. Let's go to the results. In our employee database, we had 1,806 employees. We had, excuse me, a grand total of 1,346 that, using that calculation, were recommended for some type of adjustment, and the two types of adjustment are adjustment to the minimum, so somebody's salary fell below the minimum, and 502 employees under the new proposed plan would be making less than the minimum of the proposed range, which, if you remember going back, we set that to be competitive with your external market. So you got 500 plus that wouldn't even be making the minimum. Then we said, let's apply this 25-year calculation and create a target salary for every employee, regardless of what their current salary is. If they had been in, since their promotion date, 25 years of service to the top of the range, where would they fall? And so that's where we come up with your implementation. It's also really termed an internal equity adjustment, because what you're trying to do is level the playing field. If the person's salary is more than the target salary, then what we say is congratulations, good for you. But if it's less than the target salary, then we're saying, okay, what is the gap here? What is the gap we have to make up? Out of 1,806 employees, approximately 460 were great. They weren't recommended for any adjustment. These people exceeded the target salary. That's the good news. The other 1,300 people were much further behind than I would have expected looking at your pay ranges. Much further behind. Just bringing people to the minimum of the new proposed schedule, which, if you look at it, is competitive with your market, is over $700,000. The big story is the in-range adjustments. There's $5.7 million. I know that's a big number, I can hardly say it. To bring people, to restore internal equity to your plan. What you really have to do before you go forward, if you want to, from this point forward, you want to say, we're going to have a performance-based plan, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, whatever you want to do, you want to try and level the playing field first. You cannot go forward if you're standing on shifting sand. You've got to get the foundation there. And, ladies and gentlemen, that is $6.4 million. Now, the question you're probably asking is, where does this go? And if you look at your little chart, this breaks out the $6.4 million in equity adjustments by occupational group. If you'll start with where's the 14%? I can't even read this, it's so tiny.
Technical professional.
Okay, okay. No, mine's so small, I can't read it. If you start with the 14%, the blue bar, that's your technical professional staff, and about 14% of the total would go there. That's IT, telecommunications, transportation, payroll tax, HR tax. There's about 40 people there. If you look at senior management and administration, that's the little green slice, that's about 4%. So what that little pie chart tells you is that your management and administration relative to the cost of this is 96% of the money is going someplace else. And we have about 250 people in the management and administration, so we're doing good there. That's really good news. Labor, trades, and crafts represent probably 220-some employees, Frank, is that about right?
Yes.
And that is only 6%. So you have not fared badly. I mean, you've fared very well. You've done a good job with labor, trades, and crafts and keeping them competitive in the market. Then that includes, by the way, custodial workers. So there are some adjustments in there, but not the sort of big percentages we see. The office support is office managers, secretaries, any office support type. I don't want to use the term clerical because nobody clerks anymore, but those office administrative positions that are not technical positions. These are the people, whether they're at the schools or in central office, are the ones that are making the wheels turn there at that level. There's a pretty good part of this that would go to office support. 22%, when you look at instructional support, that is just a fancy way of saying every single person in that bright, hot pink wedge is teacher assistants. The teacher assistants are way behind. This little one, this pie piece down there. So the non-instructional, which is the orange piece of the pie, is almost entirely bus drivers and food service workers. And security. So if you look at the chart, you can see that the impact of the recommendations is overwhelmingly non-administrative, managerial. It's 96%. And half of that is going to bus drivers, security officers, food service workers, and teacher assistants. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a story to tell here. Your overall structure looks good, but people are not doing what we would call normal progression through the ranges. So, I'm glad to take any questions.
Well, first of all, thank you. And my colleagues hear me say this often, the facts are your friends. So thank you for the facts. Warren?
I'm going to address my question to Dr. Birdsong. She's been in meetings with us wonderfully, and I always say it's important to ask the right questions of the right person at the right time. It's the right time. I feel you've asked the right person. The big question that's in our strategic plan is only pertaining to a slice of the Greensboro slice. And as it pertains to superlative as a word applying to school principals, help me. Is it possible that working with the right person at this right time, as we are developing a budget, that you could let Dr. Thornton know so he can let Dr. King know so that Dr. King can inform us of what we may need to make that word superlative come true?
As it relates to administrators, is that what you're saying?
As it relates to principals.
Principals, building level administrators.
Remember, that was a discussion last July, it was in our strategic plan, and that's a small slice. Now, I think the most important thing that we can do is to support our teachers. And do I think that custodial staff and security guards and everyone are teachers? Yes, I do. But if we've got to start somewhere, and we already start for being in a hole, right, Dr. Thornton? We start being in a hole. Big question I'm going to be asking in the next few weeks is, can you help us get that number to Dr. Thornton, to get to Dr. King, so they can get to us if we can start there?
Yes, and I would comment generally, I think we, certainly there's room for growth. I think our minimum and maximum, they are very competitive for administrators, and I think you'll find that some of our administrators that have left to go to
mean
other
principals
districts,
or-
principals, I
Yes.
should say
I'm
principals.
only going to talk about
They've lost money.
building instructional leaders.
I know for a fact that some of our principals that have left to go to other districts lost money when
Right.
they transitioned into another district. I think as it relates to our classified support staff, I think we're certainly more in trouble with that group than
Yeah,
we are with our principals.
My question, I only want to stay with principals right now.
Okay,
If you could be able to provide us the number so that we could know how much that number that would need to be included in FY 14, 15.
to make us more competitive for.
No, superlative.
Okay. Superlative,
Yeah,
okay,
remember, that was the word.
yes. And I can tell you that.
Not tonight,
Sure.
but do you think you'll be able to do that from this data?
From the data.
Well, from working with our consultant, will we be able to know that the next week, 2 or 3 weeks, so that we can make a conscientious decision on what we want to do?
Certainly, and I can address that. I know with our current, I know you're wanting superlative salaries for the principals. Our strategic plan specifically addresses stipends for principals that are going to hard-to-fill schools. And I know we have put that procedure in place. We are doing that, but not on a large scale. So yes, we can certainly look at that data.
That's just a
Yeah.
personal interest.
Absolutely.
And then, Mr. Chairman, my overall statement is, it's important, and there's got to be some time when we tell the truth to the people who provide us money, and we know we start from within a hole, and the hole wasn't created by us. The hole was created by a combination of state-level leaders, shifting costs to us, and everything else. But at some point in time, we're going to have to tell the whole story, as we have heard today. So that really means we've got to tell the truth, and at some point in time, we've got to try and realize what is being recommended here. But I am just have a personal interest in beginning with the top teacher in the school and hopefully moving to all the teachers in the school, and that includes custodians. But got to start somewhere. Thanks for listening to that.
Okay, we got it.
I need some help, so just be patient with me. So, so my view is a little different than Dr. Stewart's.
Sure.
The 50% of the pie for non-instructional and instructional support, plus the 26% for office support, in particular, in my view of the strategic plan and the priorities, is very much tied to school climate. I assume that in the instructional support, that includes, we were talking yesterday about pre-K, but the support staff that are in the classroom.
Yeah,
that-
like teacher assistants.
Teacher
It's all
assistants.
teacher
So
assistants.
to me, that is
Yes.
huge. Okay, that's, so I just want to make sure I'm interpreting that piece
Yes.
correctly. So I think we have to really take all the information that you all provided for us and really look at the big picture and the impact that it has on us being able to retain the track, highly qualified staff and the impact that they have in the classroom. And that's something that I know I always lean on you
I'm with you.
to champion on that.
I'm with
So
you.
I do think we have to look at that, because even as there are conversations around expanding pre-K, while we have support staff that are not in a competitive position, in my mind, those things kind of fit together. So I want to be able to, as we work through this and get some recommendations from administration on your thoughts on how we should handle this. The other question the question I have is, as you all went through and looked at classifications, were you able to do any type of analysis of the work that people were doing with the classification? So somebody could be classified as whatever, but because of the cuts and strains and other things that we've done, they may be doing the work of 2 and 3 people and be doing things completely outside of where they've been classified. So were you able to do any type of analysis or assessment of the employee base, not only for their classification and where they're being paid, but the classification and the amount of work that they're doing based upon the strain that we know that we have as a district?
There's really 2 parts to your question. And the part that said, did we look at the work being performed, the answer to that is yes, we did. Every employee was given the opportunity to fill out a web-based online job analysis questionnaire. Many of the employees who were in groups, like the bus drivers and things like that, did them in groups, and so we got one that represented, 10 or 15 people. But we had a good participation in that. So we looked at what they actually said they were doing. When you come to some of these jobs, it's not fuzzy. Like the teacher assistants are, teacher assistant pre-K3 is pretty much a teacher assistant pre-K3. Where you get into fuzziness is in the office support area. And we did look at those jobs. We also gave all the managers and supervisors an opportunity to send in a one-page sheet and say, I think this person or this job really needs, you really need to bear down on that one. And so, yes, we did look at it. You had a second part to your question, which is they're doing more. The type of work we can look at, we can measure and say, where does it fit in the hierarchy? How much they're doing, I can't judge that. My response to that, in terms of a compensation philosophy, it may not be the warmest response on earth, but if you're working a 40-hour week and you're still working a 40-hour week, you're getting paid for a 40-hour week. So unless you're in an exempt position where you're not eligible for overtime, workload becomes somewhat irrelevant for the majority of these employees. Now, where you have managerial supervisory employees who are not eligible for overtime, then workload is an issue, but we're also pairing that with the fact that we look like we're doing pretty good there. We're not in horrible shape there. So does that help you?
Just a follow-up. So clearly, you've given us data that shows a large number of employees who are underpaid or undercompensated or not market competitively compensated. Can you?
Shall we say they need equity adjustments?
Okay, they need equity adjustments, whatever. Thank you. I guess I'm also trying to figure out, in terms of our retention efforts, are we finding that there's a need, not only that we're dealing with equity adjustment issues on top of strained issues? So is there a double whammy that we're seeing in some instances or in some portion of the pie chart?
I have to step outside of statistics.
I can answer that and say it's definitely. We, example is we have 8 elementary schools who are currently in the front office staffed by an office manager, whereas 4 years ago they were staffed by at least 2 people. Imagine the strain, and you talk about volume added. Yes, the volume is there, and compensation may not be justified, but those people cannot do the job. And of those 8 schools, I've had 6 office managers to leave those schools, and I've had a large turnover there. So yes, in answer to that query, stress is there. And it's not just in that area, it's other areas, IT departments, so on and so forth. So as we have lost staff, over 600, I think, in the last 4 years, we have tried to maintain the quality in those areas. That means people had to do more with the less.
That goes back to the point that Reverend Haywood made a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about the SDS positions. That's what Mr. Scott is referring to. We lost those positions a few years ago, and the work still has to be done, so somebody has to do it. So a lot of that work fell back on the office managers or other staff.
I have a concern about a very specific classification, and that is the school security officer. And I've looked at what we're paying these officers, and I'm wondering whether this is a need for reclassification of the job as opposed to an equity adjustment for what we're paying them for actually what they're doing and for the risk that comes to them for what they're doing. Has there been any thought about the reclassification of that position that would increase their salaries?
Well, they were one of the benchmark positions. So that job would have been pegged to the market in our proposal. It means that when we went out and surveyed, we selected jobs, and one
Yes.
of the jobs that we selected to include, actually go out and ask all these other schools, what are you paying for a security officer? And when we got the averages back, that job, along with the other benchmarks, which form the reference point for the rest of the jobs, that job would have been put in a competitive market position. Now, it's the market average, so it's not going to be the highest paid, you're not going to be the lowest paid, but it would be at the market average. And then, of course, the second piece of that is, and there with that large group, where 28% of the pie would go, is looking at whether or not there are equity adjustments. And really, this is, you kind of suspend reclassification when you're doing a study like this, because reclassification is taking one or two jobs out and looking at them independently. In this, we're not really what we call reclassifying. We're just realigning the whole structure and putting everything back together again the way we hope it should be. I don't know if that fully answered your question, but yes, they were looked at.
One thing that you said was that their salaries are competitive to the what they're doing in relationship to security officers perhaps in the other districts, quite different. And thus, that should be considered in terms of school climate and the kinds of problems that we here in Norfolk encounter and what these security officers face should be considered in terms of how we look at their payment.
I think that's well received. Now, once we get down to the nuts and bolts of looking at particular job classifications, those types of equity issues ought to come out. I can make the same case for some of my parent liaisons who are exposed to some situations where you won't see in other districts. So those are the types of considerations that we need to make once we get all the data in and we look at specific job classifications as it relates to other school districts. I don't think what Carolyn did was looked at, the scope of the job as it relates to, say, from Virginia Beach and what are they security officers doing based on the job descriptions. They may say the same, but as you and I sit here, we know that they're not doing the same because they're not exposed to the same types of risks, if you will. So those types of equity issues should be dealt with after we get the final report in job classification order in this unified scale. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what we're, I'm sorry.
Just wanted to remind us that this is a huge body of information that we're going to have to begin the work as it is appearing in our strategic plan, begin the work of determining how we're going to phase in modifications to begin to correct such a huge challenge. This is a body of work. Another body of work we need to be reminded of, in addition to this, it centers on that of the review and the study that we have been doing related to our classroom teachers as well. So all of that comes together as a package for the governor's leadership team to take a look at where we are, our budgetary challenges, and determine how we're going to build a plan going forward that has to be a multifaceted plan. And in some cases, won't necessarily be short-term, maybe a bit long-term, depending on the decisions that are made. But I think the important thing is that we know that all of this is inclusive of classified staff, certified staff, and for us, this piece of information that's being reported today, but also what we know we need to continue to study as it relates to the classroom teachers and everybody else that comes into play with that. Just wanted to remind us of that.
And that's a very good point. We can't look at any of this information in isolation.
Right.
We have to look at it all as a part of the whole, and not to restate, Sam, what you're offering, but certainly in connection with the strategic plan. Warren.
Building on what Dr. King said, and I heard something, I'm going to address it to you. once again, I compliment you in asking at the right time, the right person, the right question. So that's important. But if we look at a 5-year plan, we are going to have to be courageous as a board in telling those who support us financially the truth. This is not going to be an easy truth. We start out in the hole. The hole was not created by us. State and federal folks helped with that hole a lot by cost shifting and everything else. But to Ed's point, we've got to look at what we're going to start on first. I've already expressed where I'd like to start first. Reverend Hayward spoke about what everybody's got to talk about that, but we do have to begin to address it. And it means we're going to tell people who help us with the financial support stories that may not want to hear. We got here not because of anything we did. We had huge deferments over the past 5 years that have put us in this very difficult position, and thank you for giving us this important information to help us plan a 5-year plan. But just a little information to Reverend Hayward. I'm not sure anybody, perhaps Dr. Malisi will know this, Dr. Lands will know this. 15 years ago, Norfolk, Dr. King, was the pinnacle of school security because they hired an FBI agent to head school security. It was pre-Columbine, and they decided they were going to do something proactively. They became the paragon in the whole state of Virginia. As a superintendent, I came down here to benchmark against that which they were doing. So what Reverend Haywood is bringing up is really important. For years, Norfolk was there, and then we started having Columbine and Sandy Hook and everything else. So there's a whole lot of history in this, but I have a personal preference. You know there's going to be the principal. We have less than 50 principals. You got to start somewhere, but we're all going to battle for that. But I think, school board colleagues, we're going to have to tell a story to folks who fund us, and the story is going to be a bigger number, and it's going to be difficult to hear. But it wasn't caused by this board or last board or anyone else. It's caused by circumstances we couldn't control. But we're going to have to tell the truth, and we're going to have to tell the truth in a plan, a 5-year plan with context. But it's going to require answers that you've given us, the right question at the right time. Thanks. Thanks for listening.
Just one last question I would have is, what's your recommendation on how frequent we do a study like this?
We, as a firm, we have a different approach to this kind of work than maybe some other firms do. Normally, when we do this work, and this is what we're doing here, we have a very complicated software system. I shouldn't say complicated, it's very robust with a lot of utility work built into it. We actually give to the school district and train the HR people, whoever is designated, in the use of this software. That allows you to maintain your system. We do have some clients, and some that do it on their own. We do have some clients that ask us every year to do a global market review for them, and every 2 or 3 years to go back and look at the survey benchmarks or look at another job. You don't really have to do that. So my answer to you would be, it's really how much time and staff in the Human Resources Department you can devote to this. If you can't devote any time and staff to it, and you're going to have a 5-year plan, somebody needs to be helping you make sure you get through that 5-year plan. In many cases, our clients say, okay, that's going to be you because you know where we're going. It doesn't have to be me. But somebody needs to be watching the SHEB and making sure that you are getting through that. And HR sometimes is the voice crying in the wilderness because they're in-house and, don't want to bring bad news to the board. I mean, expensive news to the board.
I can add to that. The industry standard says 5 years. Now, what Norfolk Public Schools has done in the past over many, many years is conduct job audits every year, starting between October and May. We allow department heads to evaluate their positions and determine if there's some equity issues. People may have assumed more responsibility than they had last year. They would submit requests to HR to evaluate the job. We would send them a job questionnaire, have them fill it out. We had a team of managers look at those positions and make recommendations to the board if they would deserve a pay increase based on the scope of the job changing. So we've been doing that for years. We haven't done it in the last 3 years because of the situation we've been in.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, before we move on to our teaching and learning report, we'll take a short break, and we're doing really good with time, so let's try to do about 10 minutes. Is that good?